We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good morning. Welcome to the Friday edition of this show. It is navigating the Friday FARcast mashup. No, this is the Friday FARcast, and I am your host, Robert Phoenix. And a little bit of a change in today's program. Darren Williams, who was supposed to be with me in the first hour, will not be here for reasons that are top secret. I can't reveal them to you. If I did, it would perhaps threaten the balance of the universe. But he'll be back on Friday. We're going to do something different. Darren and I will talk offline, and I will launch the interview here on BT. Just coming out of the Mercury retrograde, always fun, kind of a fun, funky kind of thing. I actually had a pretty good Mercury retrograde, now that I look back on it. Let's see what else. Kenneth Warren will be with me in the second hour today. So hang on for the second hour. We're going to talk about Kenneth's book, Capt and Poetry, Sucker Punch, which is really great. And it's too bad that Darren couldn't be a part of the first hour of the show, because we're going to get into some material that is pretty interesting. It is all about what is called the coming of the Ethiopian King. And it has everything to do with the star Sirius and the Dogon, which were very interesting, or are a very interesting group of people that live in Africa who had a lot of knowledge about the stars and life that is kind of inexplicable, unexplainable. Their whole philosophy or cosmology is that Nomo came to them as a great teacher and gave them culture. And we're going to talk about the Dogon. We're going to talk about Sirius B, because the Dogon knew where Sirius B was before astronomers could find Sirius B, could track Sirius B in the heavens. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Nomos. We're going to talk about the coming of the Ethiopian King. Fascinating stuff. And we're going to talk about some other pieces with his book, A Guide to the Homeric Punkhole, 1980-2012. We're going to talk about Charles Olson, who's a very interesting character. And Kenneth clearly comes out of the critical and poetic / bohemian circle of culture and thought, but explodes it and goes beyond it. We're going to talk about I think an interesting concept, we'll be talking about the limitations of criticism. I was an English major in college, and it was an interesting time for me as I was also going through a massive spiritual awakening during that time. I've talked about this in previous shows, but it was when I was 20 years old. 20 to 21 was a pretty powerful time for me, and I went through a massive spiritual awakening. And during that period, I began to see auras and leave my body, astral project. I was having telepathic communication with people. It was a really, really profound time. And this was all taking place while I was in college. So here I am, I'm trying to get a degree in English literature, and I'm having my third eye, my crown chakra blown open during the process. And I was desperately trying to find some form of the curriculum that was matching up with what was happening to me internally, which wasn't an easy thing to do. So I gravitated towards the metaphysical poets, people like Vaughan and Crashaw and Herbert. I gravitated towards the romantics, particularly William Blake, Walt Whitman, not a romantic, post-romantic, but a romantic in and of his own right. Fascinating when you get down into the astrology of Blake and Whitman. Blake, a Sagittarius, Whitman, a Gemini. And when you get into something like Songs of Myself, it's really very endemic of the Gemini mind, and he gets into the particulates of who he is as a relation to everything on the planet, really, and the invocation of the past and the future. But it's minute. He really gets granular. Whitman gets granular, gets into the particulates of existence, which is very, very Gemini. So I got into Whitman, and that was kind of it. I got into Yeats, and I was really into this book called A Vision, and it was a hard book to find at the time, by the way. It was written by Yeats's wife, and it was when Yeats was fooling around with the Golden Dawn, and his wife was getting these trance-like visions, and Yeats wrote a whole cosmology surrounding his wife's visionary reveries. So I was very into that, although it wasn't really part of the English curriculum at the time, at least Yeats's book, A Vision, wasn't. And by the way, his wife probably got into this because Yeats was very into, at that time as well, the Theosophical Society, and he might have had a real crush on Annie Besant, who was a medium in her own right. And so Yeats's wife decided, well, I can't let Annie Besant take my man. I'm going to start doing some channeling. I'm going to show that bitch. That's right. I'm going to give my man some juicy vision to chew on. Anyway, it was an interesting time for me to be an English lit major during a pretty profound awakening, and I found it frustrating because I was having to deal with academia, and not even at a hardcore level, but I was having to deal with the structures of academia, the structures and the strictures of academia. There was this one class that I had. It was called Humanism and Mysticism. Humanism and Mysticism. That was an English lit class. And then there was another class based on, it was called Science and Myth. Science and Myth. And it was one of these classes where it was a fusion between two departments. And what they did is they got a guy who taught anthropology, and then they had another guy who taught science, cultural. So it's cultural anthropology and scientific anthropology. Two very different beasts. And so this class was called a nexus class. And I signed up for it thinking, well, this is great. I'm going to find the intersection between these two places. And it was really kind of a shame because how they set the class up is that they would bring up these myths, theoretically, like the Epic of Gilgamesh. And we read the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's my first exposure to it. And it really blew my mind, especially with the parallels with the Bible. And then what they did is they got into the Bible, but there was this cross-section, like there's the whole Utnapishtim and the flood scenario, which is very similar to Noah and the flood. And there's also we got into the Old Testament with Moses. And so we talked about these things from a mythical or cultural anthropological perspective. And then the science teacher would come in and just slice it all up. Well, this can't be, this was red tide, the Red Sea was low, and they waded across it in their ankles, and this would happen consistently. It was like, let's serve up the mythological portion of the meal, and then let's shred it with the cleavers of science, the sharp cleavers of science. Let's shred it up so that we can masticate it and digest it. It was really not a very appealing class, and this was for me part of the challenge of academia, because it was dominated by a rigid kind of left brain, right brain demarcation. This was an issue for me. So I was always sort of struggling at the time to try to find what was going on in my mind, match what was going on in the sort of the collective brain of academia at the time. And that was a challenge. And there was this whole thing about new criticism, and we're going to get into the new school criticism with Kenneth Horne, because I really want to ask him questions about the new school. The new school was really popular when I was in college. The new school of criticism came out of Chicago, which was the University of Chicago, and it was the dominant theme in terms of how people would break down literature, poems, short stories, novels, mostly poetry. And the way that it shook out was that you would look at the poem simply in this hermetically sealed sort of container, that you would not have any historical reference, you wouldn't have any personal reference, like the poem would exist just as a poem. And it was an interesting exercise on some level, but on another level, when you dealt with somebody like Ezra Pound, and we'll get into Ezra Pound with Kenneth Horne, when you deal with Ezra Pound and you get into the cantos, there's all kinds of personal material that are associated with the cantos. And then, of course, there's the Pound material that takes place when he's in Rapallo, and really gets hip to what's going on with the money system. I mean, Ezra Pound, a lot of people just scream anti-Semite when Ezra Pound's name is evoked. And I think that's an unfair and blanket statement about Pound and about what he was doing. Ezra Pound saw the Federal Reserve and the fiat system, the fiat money system, for what it was. It was usury. And it still is usury. And whenever you evoke the term usury, of course, you're going to get into the imagery of Shylock and Shakespeare and a pound of flesh, and and then the cries of anti-Semitism, rise increasingly with each missive about the Federal Reserve and usury and fractional reserve lending. So Pound actually went to, when he was living in Rapallo, he was living in Italy during the run-up and through World War II. This was where he was hanging out. And Mussolini, who was the person who coined the term fascism, of course, Mussolini was in power at the time. And Pound lived there because, number one, it was cheap. Number two, it wasn't Germany. And number three, Pound was a Libra. And as a Libra, he loved aesthetics. He loved food. Pound was a foodie, and Italy had the best food. So it was cheap. He could live there as a man of means. He could write. He could do all his things that he loved to do, and he could do it affordably. But Pound had a great love of America, even though he lived in Italy and was theoretically an expatriate. He had a great love for the United States. I believe Pound was raised in North Dakota. He was born and raised in North Dakota, and eventually he immigrated to the East Coast of the United States, where he went to school and became friends with William Carlos Williams, another American poet. And Pound is really one of the most important people of the 20th century, apart from his ideas on money and the Federal Reserve. If it weren't for Pound, there probably wouldn't be a James Joyce. If it weren't for Pound, there probably wouldn't be Hemingway as we know it. If it weren't for Pound, there wouldn't be a Yeats as we know it. He's one of the great editors. He edited T.S. Eliot. Everybody knew each other in Paris back in the day, including, by the way, Aleister Crowley, who was living in Paris as well. Everybody was in Paris during that time. It was an amazing time to be alive. So Pound was there, and Pound eventually left Paris and went to Rapallo. Now, he went to the United States on 2 occasions, and he wanted to meet with the United States members of Congress. He wanted to meet with members of Congress, and he wanted to meet with people that were part of the judiciary, and they wouldn't meet him. They would not talk. He had one cursory meeting, and what he was trying to do was he was trying to get their attention around the Federal Reserve and the financial Ponzi scheme, which has ultimately shipwrecked this country. And not just this country, by the way, but the entire world. And I think he had a meeting with a clerk who was associated with either a congressman or one of the Supreme Court justices during the day. And that was the extent of it. And he tried to get people's attention. And he tried to talk about what was going on. And nobody would listen. So what did he do? He actually got radio time, excuse me, on Mussolini's national radio. And he did these broadcasts. And he talked about fractional reserve lending. And by the way, he also talked about Zionism. So he was considered theoretically a war criminal or a traitor. And what's fascinating is that when the U.S. came in to quote unquote liberate Italy, they didn't even really know who Ezra Pound was. And Ezra Pound had such a guilty conscience because he loved his country so much, and in his mind, he thought that he had betrayed his country. He turned himself in. Pound turned himself in. And he went to the United States, and he got put into a military prison. He had a trial, and he under the pretense of his lawyer, under the guidance of his lawyer, he was told that he should proclaim himself criminally insane instead of fighting the charges. Because it was thought that had he done that, he would have had a psychiatric evaluation, that he would have been judged sane and would have been let out shortly thereafter. Well, that wasn't the case at all. And in fact, he wound up going to a mental institution, a mental hospital called St. Elizabeth's, where he spent most of his most of his years, his final years, smoking pot in St. Elizabeth's and hanging out with Eustace Mullins. That's where Eustace Mullins finds Pound. But Pound is an interesting character. And again, you don't understand Pound completely unless you understand his history, where he came from, what he was trying to do with his poetics, what he was trying to do with his economics. All of that gets lost if you hermetically seal the poem. And perhaps Kenneth, we'll touch on this with Kenneth, and we'll get into it, and we'll find out if that was a strategy. Because if you look at the poem itself as just a poem, what do? You eradicate the history. You eradicate the history that surrounds the poem. You eradicate the history of the person who wrote the poem. And the eradication of history is potentially a very challenging thing. Now, there is some history you'd like to eradicate. I'd like to eradicate. Or at least if not eradicate, I'd like to eliminate. But it doesn't really happen that way. Well, we try to. We try to do that. That's what I try to do, to bring a different slant to history. So we'll get into this with Kenneth. We'll get into new criticism. We'll get into Pound. We'll get into Charles Olson. We'll get into the Nomos and the Dogon and Sirius in about 30 minutes, 35 minutes or so. But between now and then, I've got some time. Open line 347-308-8995. 347-308-8995. You'll be able to call in. You can call in and chime in and talk. We can talk about whatever's on your mind. In the meantime, I will rant. I will rant a little bit here. Mitt Romney's in deep trouble. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, but there's evidence linking him to Salvadorian death squads and the profitability of Bain Capital as they backed the Salvadorian government and the Salvadorian death squads. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how far this goes, because it could really impact his candidacy. A few months ago, some of you who listen to this show, a few months ago, I said that there would be a death in conjunction with Mitt Romney that would derail his candidacy. I said that, and I believe I said that on this show months ago. It might have been on the mashup, or could have been on Navigating the Astrological Matrix. But I have said this before. And there's a chance, I believe, that this is the manifestation of that. I had no idea that it would be a death squad or relation to the death squad in a number of bodies, but I just had a strong feeling that there would be a death associated with the Romney campaign that would derail this campaign. So we're going to watch, wait, and see as to how this unfolds in the days and weeks ahead. Now, this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. You have two candidates, two parties. Now, who are the people that are really invested in the candidates and candidates ascending to the realm of the chief executive of U.S. Inc.? It's not just the candidates themselves, although they have a vested interest. It's the people around them. It's the people like the Valerie Jarrett's and the Susan Rice's and the David Axelrods, the Hillary Clintons. These are the people that have a vested interest in maintaining their positions, because they would get 4 more years of running the country and essentially running the world. And if you want to know who is really the steel, who is really the hammer in the Obama administration, it is Valerie Jarrett. She is the one that is running the show. When it came down to a power struggle between Valerie Jarrett and what's his name, Frank Daley, Richard Daley's son, Who won? It was Valerie Jarrett. Daley was brought in because the political protocol wasn't taking place in a way that it should have been. And they got into a major power struggle, and Valerie Jarrett won. And it wasn't even close. Daley was there maybe, 5-6 months at the most, out the door. Valerie Jarrett is the force behind Barack Obama. And these people don't want to surrender their position. They have worked all their lives to be in that place now. Now, that's not to say that Obama and Romney are working for the same people on the same team. They are. They are. Obama and the Obama administration just signed a major bill for Israel in terms of money, in terms of support. The Romney campaign would do the exact same thing. Or the Romney presidency would do the exact same thing. The Romney presidency would do everything that the Obama administration is doing. The Obama administration is cracking down hard, and I mean hard, on medicinal marijuana. Why do they do that? Because the big money is in synthetic marijuana. That's where the big money is. It's not in something you can grow. No, it's in something that Merck or Lilly or Glaxo can manufacture and then sell. And Mitt Romney's already come out and stated made his stance very clear on synthetic marijuana versus medicinal marijuana. And Obama has not, but his actions have. The Department of Justice has come in and just put a hammer to California dispensaries. Why? Well, I just stated it. How? They're going after dispensaries based on their leases. So if a dispensary is renting from someone, they will go after the person who owns the lease on the property. And that dispensary will likely get shut down. There's various ways they can go after that. They could go after them through the IRS. They could go after them through any number of means. They put the heat on the landlord, and the landlord says, sorry, you got to go. If it comes down to me and my well-being versus yours and hundreds, maybe thousands of other people, my well-being is probably going to take precedence. So this is what's happening here in California. And Obama and Romney they have the exact same position on medicinal marijuana. There's not much of a difference. Not much of a difference at all. Here's where it gets, challenging, or here's where the competition comes into play. It's the people around them. Think of this election, and think of any election, even the John Kerry and Bush election, as an episode of the TV show Big Brother. Think about it. Or an episode of Survivor. Now, everybody on the island or wherever they go now for Survivor, they're all there to be the last one standing. But within the context of that competition, there are groups. And it starts off with one team and another team, the red team and the blue team. They have the tribes, right? The Tonganasa tribe and the Rafili tribe, or whatever they call themselves, from tribe to tribe. And so it starts off with two separate groups. And then what happens? Well, those groups merge at one point. However, those affiliations that are based on two groups and generally two leaders within each group, they don't really go away. Now, some people may flip sides in order to be on the winning team or on the winning tribe or to get to that point where they can ascend. But ultimately, it is really, they're all working towards the same end. And what's happening now, it's the people around Obama, they're the ones that want to maintain that position. They don't want to have to go home at the end of the day. Now, if the fickle finger of fate or the hand of God says you must lose and you must leave, well, that's just the way it is. But until then, they will do whatever they can in order to stay there because they don't want Romney and his people coming in. Do you think Valerie Jarrett just wants to go back to living in Chicago and being a community organizer? No. Maybe she'll get a cush gig on the Council on Foreign Relations and some think tank in Washington. We know she won't be going to the Cato Institute, but something along those lines. You think she's ready for that? I don't think she is. I certainly don't think Susan Rice is. I don't think Hillary Clinton. Who knows with Hillary Clinton? David Axelrod, he's not ready to go back into advertising and marketing. So these people will fight for their position. What's interesting about Romney, he's got a big political machine around him. Dan Senior, by the way, is Romney's right-hand man. Dan Senior is a dual citizen with Israel, married to what's her name, Brown, the former correspondent for CNN. But Dan Senior, very influential in the Bush administration. He's the guy running the Romney campaign. And he's connected to all of the neocons. He's connected to Richard Pearl and Lewis Libby, and all those guys. So that's the tribe that Romney has aligned himself with. And then you've got the Chicago tribe. And they're fighting it out because that tribe wants to get power. And they will, and so what they're trying to do is position themselves so that ultimately they're the ones that the puppet masters are going to say, you know what, good job. Good job. You outsmarted the other team. You're worthy. You're worthy of being in that position. Go ahead. Have another 4 years on us. That's what's going on. And so they decided to play cutthroat. And there is some distinction, by the way, between the Chicago group and the neocons. One might call the Chicago group the neo-libs or the neoliberals. All the neocons came out of the Bush era, the Bush and Reagan era. They're all old school social progressives that flipped the script and became hardcore Democrats. Hardcore Republicans. And aligned themselves with American Enterprise Institute, Brookings, all those groups that drew up the PNAC, which is the Project for a New American Century. All that stuff came out through those people. The neo-libs come out of kind of a slightly different vector. They're more aligned and associated, obviously, with Saul Alinsky, the Chicago School, and in many ways, the Bolshevik wave that came out of New York City and turned Russia into the communist empire of the 20th century. So it's two different sections or two different factions and two different sectors that are going at it. So what's going to happen now? Well, they've just dumped this information out into the mainstream media, about Romney and the death squads of El Salvador. And don't kid yourself, that came from the people in the Obama camp. It's not that some journalist did a bunch of muckraking and found the missing pieces around that. Now, they may have been led down that path with clues, with certain bits of information, with insider access. This can happen. And normally this is how it does happen. But ultimately, those really salient pieces of information, which have been guarded for quite a while. I mean, how long has Mitt Romney been around? He's been around quite a, he was governor of Massachusetts. Did this ever come up? No. He ran the Olympics in Salt Lake City. Did this ever come up? No. He actually was part of the nomination process 4 years ago. Did it come up? No, it didn't come up. It's only come up now. Why? Well, because it's politically expedient. And who did it? You can look inside the White House, no doubt. So it's going to be interesting to see how far this goes. Will it be an NPR issue? Will it be a fringy Huffington Post NPR issue? Or will CNN and then Fox get a hold of it? And what will come about as a result? We'll see. My sense is that he's going to wind up having to give up the goose. And I still think Obama's a one-term president. And I said that before. Can both these things occur? I think they can. So I'm not going to go back on my prediction. I said, well, Obama's one term, and I believe it. And I don't know what the details are around that. It could be anything from actually losing the election. It could be no election. It could be something happening to Obama before the election. I don't know, but I got one term months ago. And I also think that Romney's in trouble. And this death squad piece it has the potential to really mushroom. And we'll see how he deals with it. Excuse me. It's 10:36 here, and you're listening to the Friday FARcast. I'm Robert Phoenix. I'm your host. We're waiting for Kenneth Warren to join us at the top of the hour to talk about Captain Poetry Sucker Punch. Should be a great episode. If you're listening, hang on and hang in there. Kenneth will be joining us. Some major stuff is going on also in the middle of this country. I talked a little bit about it, I believe, on the Wednesday show, and it was what's happening with the Mississippi River. And the Mississippi River the waters on the Mississippi are receding, and the salt water of the Gulf of Mexico is now increasing and flowing into the New Madrid Basin, which starts right there at the mouth of the Mississippi River. It's starting to happen. And the reason it's happening is because there's a severe drought and heat wave that is just absolutely wreaking havoc with crops and cattle in the majority of this country. It is huge. And there are two things that are going to happen as a result of this. And I talked a little bit about it on the Wednesday show. Obviously, there's no corn. The corn crops are just tragically deficient. Now, keep in mind, it's genetically modified corn, and a lot of this corn is going to wind up would have wound up in gas tanks as a result of ethanol production. So gas is going to go up, since most gas is around 10 to 15% ethanol now, which is utterly crappy for engines, by the way. Ethanol is terrible for engines. It breaks engines down, and you get worse mileage with ethanol as well. So you get worse mileage. It's worse for your engine, but it's great for farmers because they've been getting corn subsidies. So yeah, they'll grow tons of corn. So this is what's happening with the corn, and gas prices are going to go up. Food prices are going to go up. Why? Because they feed cows corn, which, by the way, is completely unnatural. Cows don't eat corn, they eat grass. But corn gets cows fatter faster, so it's going to cost more money to feed those cows. What's going to happen? That's going to be passed on to you as a consumer if you eat corn-fed beef. And if it's not you that's eating corn-fed beef, well, somebody somewhere is going to eat that corn-fed beef, and that price for them is going to go through the roof as well. So now you've got food prices on the rise. You've got gas prices as a result of ethanol, or the lack thereof, rising. This is all coming down in 2013, folks. You're not going to see it until 2013. You're not going to see the majority of what's taking place happen until then. So food prices are going to rise, and food has been rising steadily over the past 8 years. Let's go to the supermarket. I'll give you a clear example as to how much food prices have risen. back in 2002, 2001, 2002, when I was in the .com world, I was commuting from La Honda to Redwood City, and I would stop at Roberts Market, and I would buy a small cup of goat milk yogurt. That cost me 99 cents. Now, if goat milk yogurt was costing me 99 cents, how much was regular yogurt from cow's milk? Well, that was about half the price. That was about 49, 59, 69 cents. Well, the goat milk yogurt that I bought for 99 cents is now $2. It's gone up 100%. 100%. I used to get the big containers, which were $3.99. They're $6.99 now. And those regular cups of yogurt, which were 49, 59, 69 cents, you can't find them for under $1.39. So regular yogurt, just plain regular Stonyfield yogurt, or, brown cow yogurt, that yogurt is more now than the top of the line, cream of the crop, goat milk yogurt from 2001. So this is my yogurt index. This is how I base the economies, on the yogurt index. Yogurt's through the roof. Through the freaking roof. Everything else is as well. Go buy some cheese. You can't get a small package of cheese for less than $4. I remember when that cheese was $1.99. Or maybe you can. Maybe go to Trader Joe's and get it for $3.49 if you're lucky. You got to buy bulk. If you buy bulk, then obviously it's going to come down a bit. But food it's been steadily rising for the last 8 years. Well, guess what's going to happen next year? It's going to be the elbow curve. Stick your arm straight up, and then take your hand and point it towards the sky. But it's the elbow curve. That's where food is headed in 2013. Gas prices, same thing. And if gas prices go up because it's costing more. Now, luckily, most tractor trailer rigs that bring the food to market run on diesel. Okay? Diesel is not infected by ethanol. You can't mix ethanol and diesel. It'll screw up the diesel. But diesel prices are not immune to the rising cost of gas. They just literally get dragged along in the tide with the rising cost of gas. So diesel prices are going to go up as well. So now you've got food prices going up. You've got gas prices going up. If gas prices go up, guess what? The cost of food to get to market or to get to the restaurant, they're going up as well. So it's a double sledgehammer. And that's coming in 2013. Now, let's go to the next level with this. What's happening with the water supply? The water supply, if this is all drought-based, the water supply is drying up. Well, guess who's been buying most of the aquifers in northern Texas, southern Colorado, Missouri, places like that, the Ozarks? T. Boone Pickens. T. Boone Pickens has been buying up water like crazy. Why? For a moment like this, because now he's going to be selling that water. Water is going to become a publicly traded commodity. That's what's happening. And it's going to be tragic. They tried this. They tried to privatize water in Argentina right after Argentina defaulted. By the way, Argentina is close to defaulting again. Inflation is out of this world in Argentina. But the first time that this happened, I think it was like 8 to 10 years ago when Argentina hit the skids. They tried to privatize water. It was a French company. It wasn't Vivendi, but it might have been associated with Vivendi. They came in and they privatized the water supply and totally screwed it up. Water has been generally held as one of the sacred trusts, one of the sacred municipal trusts that cannot be violated. Why? Because water literally comes out of the ground, whether it's a lake or a well. It is one of these things. It's not like energy. Energy prior to solar, you had to put some effort into acquiring energy, whether it's turbines, whether it's dams like the Hoover Dam and harnessing a river, and the Colorado River, by the way, is also drying up, or whether it's nuclear. There was a cost there is a cost that goes into creating energy. It's not a resource an inalienable resource like, say, water is. You got to do something to turn it into energy, okay? So there's a cost incurred on that. Water is a totally different creature. Water is here. You know, if you got a well, you can tap it. If you're by a lake, you go down to the lake and you get your water and you drink it. You know, if you're in Oregon, you collect rainwater, unless, of course, the state now believes that the rainwater belongs to them, in which case you can't. But there's a difference between water and power as far as a municipality and utility goes. It's fundamental. One exists, and the other you have to do something to convert it. So therefore, you could pay somebody to convert the energy. Well, with water, you do pay somebody in order to bring water to your house. But it's a soft utility. It's not a hard utility like power. And what's going to happen is that because of the drought, it's going to change all that. And water is going to become privatized in large pockets of the United States. And T. Boone Pickens is ready to pounce on that. And not only will it become privatized, but as a commodity, it's going to be traded. Now think about that for a second. Think about how dangerous that is as a concept. Because what we know about commodities is that the commodity markets can be manipulated. Here's an example. Let's say you're a hedge fund and you have millions and millions and millions of dollars at your disposal. Okay? Millions of dollars. Because that's what it costs to buy in to a hedge fund. A lot of times it's like, you know, there's a minimum, $100,000, $500,000, $1 million. Now, what happens to that money? Well, first of all, you're going to make the people that run the hedge fund rich. That's number one. Number two, they use that money to leverage markets. They're like a gang. So, for instance, if the hedge fund decides that they're going to short the price of oranges and orange juice, let's say it's orange juice, on the futures market, the commodities market, there's a spike price. And you have to either go beyond the spike price or stay under the spike price in terms of making money. So let's say the spike price for orange juice for a quart of orange juice is $2.49. It's the median price across the country, $2.49 for a quart of orange juice. Okay, and you've got to hit $2.49. Or you've got to go above $2.49 or below $2.49 by, say, September 22nd. Now, if you are investing in orange juice to go above $2.49, well, how would orange juice go above $2.49? Well, it would be as a result of the marketplace where supply and demand is getting worked out, that there would be less of a supply of orange juice and more of a demand for it. Therefore, the price would rise, and it would go above the $2.49 spike price or the strike price, right? I mean, that's how the game is played. Now, if you're betting that it would go above that price, well, wouldn't you want to be able to control the marketplace to do that? Well, how would you do it? Well, you'd go into Florida and you would buy millions of oranges. You would take, if you're a hedge fund, you would take your investors' money and you would go in and you would buy millions of oranges. And now those oranges aren't available for production. There's less oranges. Nature has not created the lack of supply. Man has created the lack of supply. So guess what? There's less oranges, which means that there's going to be less orange juice. If there's less orange juice, then the price is going to go up. That's how the game works. That's how the game works. Now, let's put water into that arena. Well, what happens then? Well, what happens then is you get what's happening in the Midwest right now, which is going to drive the price of water through the roof. And that's now. What's going to happen, say, 1, 2, 3 years from now when this is an open trading practice and it's nascent at this point? What's going to happen then? Well, again, water is sacred. It's sacred. And when you get baptized, you don't get baptized in ketchup, unless, of course, you're Erica Badu. You get baptized in water. Water it's the fluid of life. And now they're going to turn it into a commodity. And they're going to do everything in their power to create market trends with water. That's happening. That's coming in 2013. So in 2013, we've got water as a commodity and the dearth of water. Oh, and by the way, I was driving up and down the I-5 last week, and every 2 miles or so, I saw a sign which was all about what they're doing to water from a congressional standpoint and a Senate standpoint in the Central Valley. They are taxing the shit out of water for farmers. There are water taxes that Central Valley farmers are having to deal with. And I saw signs all up and down the I-5 corridor all about this. So what's going to happen? Well, again, the price of food is going to go up because of this tax. And it's going to run some farmers out of business. There are still, most farms are massive agro farms. Even if they're family farms, they have deals in place with people like ConAgra or Monsanto in order to keep their family farm running. It's what's happened. They've done deals with the devil. They didn't want to give up their farms. It's done. People in the Midwest, by the way, they're selling their farms now. They have no choice. They have no choice in the matter. Their crops are dead, and these people run on such thin margin that if they lose a season of crops, they're screwed. They're totally screwed. They're having to sell their farms. Who's going to take over those farms? Well, of course, it's going to be massive corporate farming. Same thing is going to start to happen in the Central Valley. Now, they can't really produce a drought in the Central Valley per se because the Central Valley is connected to one of the greatest aquifer systems on the planet. And it all starts in the Sierras, and the snow and the ice pack from the Sierras. It melts every year. It gets dumped into the aquifer system. The aquifer system is also connected to the Colorado River. It's massive. And so the Central Valley in California always has water available to it. However, if you want to create a greater demand, even though the supply is plentiful, you tax it. So you create a synthetic demand. You synthetically diminish the supply by making the supply costlier. So that's what's happening in the Central Valley right now. I'm telling you, people, forces are at work that are really taking a massive sledgehammer to the economy of this country. So why? Why is this all taking place? What's going to happen in 2013? Well, the social conditions. If people have food that is through the roof, gas prices that are through the roof, water prices that are through the roof, water that is hard to find, water that is being publicly traded, jobs that aren't being created, what's going to happen? There's going to be a climate of social unrest that is going to be unprecedented. And you won't get people like, I can't even remember his name. I mean, it's just, Wade. The only thing I can remember is his first name, Wade, who went in and theoretically slaughtered the group of Sikh worshippers, even though there were 4 people that were witnessed to go in there. I mean, it's not just your run-of-the-mill conspiracy theory. These are people that were at the temple. They saw 4 darkly clad people, and in association with the guy that shot himself in the temple while he was in the temple. It won't be that kind of scene. It won't be an MK Ultra false flag scene. It'll probably be closer to the real deal. People are going to be pissed off. There won't be any food, or the food will be really expensive. Food, by the way, is what started the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. People didn't have any food. Why? The food was hijacked. Bread and grains were stolen off trains, created an artificial demand. People were hungry. They were pissed off. They thought that the czar was taking all the food and all the money, and they wanted change. That's what's happening. That's what's going to happen here in this country in 2013. And it's going to give rise to people being very angry and upset. When people are angry and upset, their patience is worn thin, they will do drastic things. The problem is that nobody's going to come along and say what's really happening. They're not going to come along and say, hey, look, these are the conditions that people are facing. I've got a different solution. You know, if Mitt Romney, here's the deal. This is what I find fascinating. All right, Mitt Romney is filthy freaking rich. The guy is obscenely rich. If he really wanted to be a force for change, why wouldn't he just come right out and say, here's what's happening, this is what's going on, and oh, by the way, I have a solution. I have all the money in the world, and I've found a solution. And here's the solution. We can do X, Y, and Z. He can become a quote-unquote force for good. It doesn't have to be Mitt Romney. It could be Ted Turner. It could be Bill Gates. It could be any of these guys. But they're not doing it. Bill Gates is turning mosquitoes loose at TED Talks and saying, here, how do you feel now? This is what it's like in Africa. And that's what Bill Gates is doing. Bill Gates is developing vaccines. That's his answer. Bill Gates is helping salt away every single seed in the planet and sticking them in a big vault up in Greenland. That's his solution. Ted Turner, what's Ted Turner's solution? Buy up as much land as possible in South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, and Montana. That's his solution. Now, there may be some things that are behind the scenes that I don't know about. It's quite possible. But they sure as hell aren't interpenetrating the mainstream. And what's George Soros' solution? Oh, I know. Start an Occupy movement. And then turn that off. During an election year, turn it off. That's George Soros' solution. Okay, it is now 11 o'clock on the dot, and you are listening to the Friday FARcast, and it looks like my guest, Mr. Kenneth Warren, has just stepped into the queue, and we're going to bring him on here in just a second. Thank you for listening to the rant. And let me just say this: if you want to deal with this, if you want to get ahead of the curve, here's what you want to do. You want to follow the first dictum of the Native American philosophy, which is know where you get your water. You got to know where you get your water. Water will be the staff of life in 2013 and beyond. So you want to think along those lines. Make sure you have access to water. And whenever you drink a glass of water or your bottled water, give thanks for that water, because it is going to be in short supply in the months and the years to come. Okay, enough of that. Let's get into this with our guest, Kenneth Horn. Let's bring him on, the author of Captain Poetry, Sucker Punch.
Greetings, Robert.
Hey, Kenneth, how are you?
Very well, thanks. Great show. I think you're setting up a nice context for our exploration.
Yeah, well, we are, the old maxim was, you live in interesting times, and these times are beyond interesting, and I can't really recall. And I've been on this planet for 51 years and really kind of conscious of my time here from about the age 8 on. And though the 60s were kind of insane for me as a kid, watching the Vietnam War on the news every single night, I can't really recall a time, maybe really since the 60s, where there's been so much chaos taking place in the world. I mean, we went from Aurora in basically 1 week to this thing that happened at the Sikh temple in Wisconsin, and it's just happening now with kind of this rate of acceleration that Terence McKenna and even Robert Anton Wilson talked about. What's your take on where we are right now, Kenneth?
Well, it's certainly a wild, volatile, fracking time, and I think we can. I mean, what you were talking about with water, this is all. It's all indicative of a larger assault by the system of financialization, which is ramping up its powers of extraction. But these powers of extraction are powers that were formulated, in the 19th century, certainly, and we're seeing that acceleration, no doubt. You were talking about Ezra Pound and his economics, and his economics were built on a response to World War I. So really, we're looking at the acceleration of war and the acceleration of the war machine, and these are all symptoms of a sick economic system and a sick and pathological civilization.
Yeah, absolutely. What's really interesting is that I just read this piece on, I think it might have been Mercola the other day, and it was this reflection on the health of the being, of the individual being, and Mercola and some other people had found out that people that lie have really poor health, and there's this connection, this sort of somatic connection between lying and illness, and I think I think what you're getting at here is on a collective level, we're seeing this accumulation of lies and denial and illusion taking place, and as a result, there's a sickness to the collective body as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're living in a pathological fantasy, and you were laying out the bicameral brain and the lateralization wounds of a culture that has just sharpened itself into a lacerating spear of the left brain. Yeah. And those titanic powers of extraction and fracking are ripping out anything that we as human beings have held in common.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's I mean that trajectory. In other shows, you've talked about William Blake's Satanic Mills in London, and all you have to do is kind of look at those as the pistons, right?
Yes.
That are pile driving through our planet. And our pathology is to believe that these are the pillars of our altar of Moloch, to whom we offer our useless eaters and feeders.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of when I was a kid, and I was at the 1964 World's Fair with my parents, and everything was a shrine to the religion of technology. I mean, everybody was there: GE, Kodak, AT&T. I think it was Atlantic Bell at that time.
Yeah.
It was really the coming of age of science as the thing that would theoretically save us. It was the pantheon of the new gods, and they were all there. In fact, they even made Lincoln into an automaton, which is interesting because now we've got this film about Lincoln when Spielberg's coming out with that. And science as a religion has now become these forces of extraction, which you're talking about, and I think what we're really trying desperately to get back to is this connection between an organic universe and this sacred universe. And what's happening now is that the forces of extraction don't want that to take place.
Absolutely. It's the ownership society, except it's owned by the 1%.
Yeah. Let's talk about you a little bit. You've got this book. It's an amazing book, and it's thick, it's dense, it's rife with all kinds of layers of language, dimensionality. It's essays. It's beyond essays. It's kind of a hyper narrative of life, of your life. It's a life work. When did you start working on this?
Well, I would say my work really began. I mean, it is a work of autopoiesis, as you say, which has to do with the self-organizing system of my own life. When I was born. So that's kind of the intrinsic driver is a sense of one's life journey in terms of one's soul and an autopoietic system. In terms of my cultural background, I come out of a working-class Catholic background, the mongrel mix of Italian, Irish, and German. And you were talking about the neocons. So I grew up in kind of the neocon crucible, and I take that neocon crucible back to two codes of group spirit. One, the Baltimore Catechism, and the other, the Torah. Okay, so this kind of dialectic between group spirits of Roman Catholic intellectuals and Jewish intellectuals on the East Coast is really the crux of what Murray Friedman, in a great book called The Neoconservative Revolution, Jewish Intellectuals and the Shaping of Public Policy, captures in his Cambridge University Press book. And when I was reading that book, I was thinking, wow, yeah, I mean, this is definitely the order of political economy under which my punctum came of age.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to a Catholic high school during the 1960s, Holy Cross High School in Flushing, Queens, and with a little collective band of comrades, Steve Rapp, Steve Kelly, George Doolittle, Bob Cusimano, we launched a little mimeograph magazine of poetry and student protest called Students Need a God, SNAG. And in a certain sense, that was our Straussian moment, where we had realized that collectives are demanding a God. Otherwise, anarchy will be loosed. And we saw the manipulations of power within our own high school, and decided that we were going to loose some anarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And which is really the punk pulse, which drives one into underground culture, and so that was my trajectory into kind of the cultural underground, and my disconnection and rebellion against the larger powers that be, and I would say that those were neoconservative powers, neoconservative powers that are now sitting on the Supreme Court. And if we look at the time-band trajectory of pretty much our lives, okay, so I'm 59, you're 51. I look at Kent State as a kind of crucial battle in the Civil War between America's North and South.
Yeah.
And I lived in Cleveland, so my trajectory moved. I studied for 2 years at SUNY Geneseo, and it's interesting that you mentioned Pound, because one of Pound's kind of wild and crazy proteges was a Chinese poet named David Raphael Wang, and I studied Pound and Brecht with David Raphael Wang, who regarded himself in the samurai tradition of Afro-Hellenic Chinese samurai. And the interesting thing about Wand was that he captured in that phrase the three root races, which you'll find consistent in theosophy. So these ideological interfaces of collective group spirits, the ideologies that support them in their trajectory to gather resources for themselves, was something that I've been looking at, and also looking at it in terms of cultural production and values and visions in countercultures, and also looking at the remains of the visionary poetry tradition, down from Blake, through Pound, through Olson, and those remains, or those, there's been a pummeling of those visionary shards. And you talked about the new criticism earlier in your show as a kind of objective conceit, and this is really kind of part of the professionalization trajectory, which and professionalization is really nothing more than another order of extraction, right?
Yeah.
That allows one to obtain a kind of financial leverage over whatever body politic is going to lie comatose for you.
Right.
On your couch or in your office, or under your amnesia, and so I wanted to, and my professional work, so to speak, was as a public library director, and so I realized that that was the place for me. Like you, I was not really turned on by straight kind of literary academic studies. The semiological linguistic term in the late 70s, early 80s, I regard it as a kind of another mode of this formalism and titanic abstraction, extraction, acceleration. So I've always been looking more toward the kind of the Dionysian order, the visionary Dionysian order that was put out of business in the 60s, and looking at that tension between Titanism and the Dionysian, and reading culture archetypally, and that's my sense of the punkhole that you have in the book as a container, as a kind of feminizing container for these shattered pieces of the visionary order that are contained in my journey to the underworld. And then, as the postscript to the book, we take those out and move it into the Lakewood Observer Project, which was a project in community journalism, which had a Poundian dimension, actually, because what I was looking to do was kind of move poetic propositions and put them into play in an actual community in place. And so the creation of a newspaper, a community currency, food security, a freshwater institute, all of the issues of community defense that you've suggested in your opening were parts that I was looking to actually advance in a particular place. not particularly successfully, but I thought that it was necessary for my journey to kind of press, seeing the storm clouds that were on the way,
right.
to press as hard as I could in community to try to defend what could be held in common. And so that's, in a nutshell, that's my journey, and that's my story, and that's my process. And I capture it. It's kind of it's tacit within the book, and but that's the structure of my life, and I bring a Jungian archetypal scaffolding to those contents and moments of critique and exploration and participation that comes over the course of the last 30+ years.
How long ago were you involved in that collective where you were trying to nail down some of these sacred trusts that we're talking about here on the show today?
That would have been in 2005.
So you were
2005, pretty much 2005 until my retirement.
So you were quite prescient and very aware of what was taking place in 2005.
Absolutely, because I was in an inner ring suburb of Cleveland. And I saw exactly what was going on, plus the whole issue of fresh water. I was, aside from being a kind of punk critic, I was a professional administrator who knew, the local politicians and the lay of the land, and I saw the crisis that was coming to the public sector, and I wanted to instigate as forcefully as I could. Actually, in Cleveland, I was pressing the man who's the present mayor. I said, look, what you need is a community-backed currency based on the water, and you'll be and you need to begin compensating your public sector workers in portions of this currency, because the trick is, you want to be able to hold something back from the dominant financial system,
right,
so that a community can hold in common. And I put my neck on the line as far as I could, knowing, from Ezra Pound that just to play with the money system is kind of the third rail in civilization. But I wanted to see how far I could go as a citizen. And I was working with Tom Greco. I was I was talking to Les Squires, and also Louis Solomon, who wrote a book, Rethinking Our Centralized Monetary System. I was going to our local savings and loan and saying, look, let's come up with, and in doing the kind of community focus group work, trying to find out, well, what would it take to, for you to trust in a kind of local script. And that was, even in a small town of 50,000, it's really hard to break through the money complex. And but I wanted to try that and see what I could advance.
Right.
And there was a newspaper that, understanding that in order to get these kind of complex ideas out, you're going to need an organ of propaganda. But I was not really able to drive some of these more utopian, visionary ideas, which come straight out of poetry. And the point was to try to apply the poetic propositions in a real-time instantiation in a real place and see what pops.
Yeah. What kind of allies did you have when you were attempting to do that?
Well, I had allies that were, a couple of local businessmen. The man who designed, Jim O'Brien, who was the guy who actually designed the cover of my book, is a kind of local graphics artist and wizard. And a local printer, Steve Davis, Steve Calhoun, an organizational consultant. I had people that lived in the town, and there was also a battle over economic development within the town. Actually, a kind of civil war which was very actually, kind of famous, because I think it was Mike Wallace who came to town and interviewed the mayor, and they were going to take people's property in order to create a shopping mall. And people were believing that, well, this is the answer. This is our economic development answer that's going to allow us to sustain our quality of life. And then other people were outraged that the sanctity of private property was under siege. And so that split the town in two. And so I was the public library director, and I wanted to see what we could do to kind of bring some healing and bring a sense of commonality to the stakes involved, because you see what the individual is up against, and there's a sense of a baseline sense of community norms that you have to try to establish in order to get any real work done. At that ground level. So this was my and every expert in terms of community currency, said, look, you got to get down to the low road. This thing can't be imposed from above. Yeah. And so I walked that low road and tried to get allies involved. And there's been I guess the most successful aspect of, and we also wanted a kind of a free college. I was challenging the University of Akron to give us the opportunity to kind of bring academics into a circuit of learning and knowledge that would be paid for by this community currency. The trick is to jack in our expertise into circuits of exchange that are going to have real life value, more than more than a massage or simply things that are soft-sided goods.
Right.
And that's the kind of advance that one would need to make in order to do that. And I was also hoping that look, just as a signal, to do this in a post-industrial area that's struggling, that has been battered by globalization, that you need to take a stand on this. And I somebody who worked for the Brookings Institute at the Levin College of Urban Affairs, I started pushing. I go, Ken, this is crazy. It sends the wrong signal to the global economy that we're not competitive. I said, well, what do you see coming for the next 10 years? He goes, well, I do see 10 years of pain. And I said, you do nothing? So, it was tough to get institutional. It was tough to get institutional support for this kind of advance. But you need to find common. Either the institutions are going to be are going to collapse, and there will be no solidarity and no mutuality on the ground in the way of community norms. And in some ways, I think when you look at Gen X and you've looked at the generations and the outer planets, right? I mean, you can see that this is kind of the crisis that generation isn't too worried about.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. I mean, this thing brings up a lot of questions and a lot of issues. And if you take the pulse of anybody that's connected to Washington in any kind of a fairly intimate way, what they'll tell you is that globalism is really the driver right now. That notions of bioregionalism, sustainability, real sustainability, not the global synthetic sustainability that is being driven by the UN, one size fits all, but a real sensitive and localized sustainability, and even patriotism. All of those things are quaint notions and are not going to get you reelected in Washington right now. So what we're looking at are these economic forces that you talk about, these drivers that are determining not just policy, but human behavior as well. And it's almost like there's this, and I've talked about this with Jay before, Jay Widener, this psychopathic insertion of a form of consciousness that is monolithic, and it's urban, it's citified, it's urban, it's industrial, and it is not organic, it is not natural, and in fact, it is petrified in some ways of those notions of the wild. Therefore, we've got all these systems of control that are put in place by this driver. Would you
Absolutely.
agree with that?
It's an economic driver that would go contrary to one of Pound's key economic beliefs, and that belief is rooted in the generosity of nature, right? So if you can move people away from any contact with nature, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna be able to disconnect them from any sense of generosity. So the competitive force then ramps up even farther.
Right.
And the death throes of what's human, what's natural, and what's social becomes a part of that pulverized history.
Yeah, it reminds me of Freud and Freud's death-like fear of the id, and the id being nature, and wanting to control that at all costs. And what's really fascinating is that his daughter got into this whole thing around Freudianism creating sort of the model citizen, or the model democrat, or the model democratic citizen. And here you have Freudianism and democracy and citizenship being linked through his legacy with his daughter. And really what they've done is they've lopped off our imagination. They've lopped off the sacral part of who we are. And that's why I think there's a lot of insanity, viral insanity that's taking place right now in our culture.
Absolutely. No, there's a great book by a Jungian topologist, John Giannini, called The Compass of the Soul. And he looks at the pathology of patriarchy, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about the pathology of patriarchy, which can be broken down heuristically to extroverted thinking, sensation, and judging.
Right.
And Freudian psychology kind of supports that trajectory, and Jungian psychology is a different psychology that works a different mix, which would be more intuitive and thinking. Gestalt would be another mode. So you want to be able to kind of understand, at a kind of baseline, you understand symbols, right, and you understand energy, and you understand these processes, for simple organizations, people who take a Myers-Briggs test, that really want the empirical data, that want a kind of objective valorization of the test results, because they don't, necessarily trust their own experience. The topology is a very useful way of bringing someone in to an understanding of a wider archetypal core, which all of these forces are looking to just kind of make sure that you put your blinders on and don't have a clue. Yeah,
absolutely. And as a result of it, what do we have? What is the manufactured product of the denial of the id, or the denial of the wild? What we have is this culture of porn, the porn, violence, the porn of violence,
right?
And then the porn of porn itself, which
right.
is just this ham-fisted, sensate experience without love, without
right.
connection, without intimacy. These are the things that are given to us now.
Absolutely.
As a sort of placebo. It's like,
right.
Here, take these. Don't nurture the real wild parts of the psyche and your nature, because we don't want you to do that. Because if you do that, then you're going to think independently, and that will threaten our hegemony, our
right.
system, our order. But we'll give you this supplication. Here's
it's
porn.
a supplicated eros. It's a kind of virtual. It's a virtual eros. You can see the absorption of human attention and connection into these wires, into these screens, into the wireless, and the embodied world, and the connectivity and orders, and even civic belonging. All of these are under massive suppression.
Yeah.
And that world of substantial expression, of body, place, voice, in many ways, that world also was put under attack from formalism and the linguistic term in poetic practice, and so this is part of the Dionysian body. This is part of that womb world of water and feeling that that the 1% wants to grab for itself.
That's right, absolutely.
And I mean, and mythologically, I mean, this is what's always. I mean, these. If you think about the god Kronos, right? Sensation.
Yeah.
Lead. Right.
Yeah.
And the killing. The killing of the child. The killing of the child.
Yeah.
And even baby Zeus was threatened. And Zeus is a kind of avatar of the thunderbolt, right? The thunderbolt of intuition. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Baby Zeus even had to be protected.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's very little that people are protecting outside of that feminized world. And that's why as we move into this into the age of Aquarius and kind of the the shift to Aquarian girl power, and making sure that some of that girl power sustains that intuitive connection to the collective is going to be crucial.
Yeah, I would agree with you, with the one caveat in that the girl power. Here's my take on this, Kenneth.
Yeah.
Is that there is an understanding from an esoteric, symbolic, and occult level that these shifts are taking place.
Absolutely.
And then what's going to happen is that we're going to be given a variety of symbols,
right,
or a variety of personae that theoretically are
going to put you under image and put you under an image trance.
Exactly. And
right.
So therefore we're getting that thing
Absolutely.
On some level, but we're not really getting that thing.
Right. Absolutely. It's the rope-a-dope.
Yeah.
It's the rope-a-dope. So yeah, you're definitely going to. That's why it's crucial to be able to develop the kind of narrative chops that you show every day on your show. To move intelligence through symbols, to keep that, to keep intuition alive, to keep the synthetic powers of the brain, right?
Yeah.
Moving in communication.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the pineal gland and the role that it plays. To that end, and you get into the pineal gland in what I think is really the pinnacle of your book, which is Friendship Among Poets, Nomos Rising, and Hexagram 43, which is Hexagram 43, Rising of the Lake in the I-ching, in the Lake of Heaven. And really, in some ways, what we're seeing now with the Gulf of Mexico is Hexagram 43, with those waters rising and meeting the Mississippi, which is drying up, and that's not really a great rising of the lake. In some ways, it could even be considered a synthetic rising of the lake, or the rising of the lake of heaven. But nonetheless, it's a symbol that's occurring now, in real time. But let's talk about this. It's a brilliant essay, and you start with that hexagram of the I-ching, and then you really get into this whole concept of the Dogon and the Nomos and Nomo, and also the rise of the Ethiopian King. Let's get into that for a second. Let's start. Yeah, just jump right in. Talk about how you interpret that hexagram, why that hexagram became such a symbol for you, and how you were able to connect it with this really fascinating narrative arc of the rise of the Ethiopian King.
Okay. Well, I'm involved with various friends who are poets, and also I've been studying Charles Olson for quite some time, and a number of poets that were involved in the Olson Centenary in 2010 wanted to have a council. And this council was called Cloudburst Council. A poet named Alan Castline had drew hexagram 43 for the gathering, and as a result of his pulling that card, each various poets were asked to bring something to the table, so to speak.
Right.
So I wanted to reflect on the hexagram and the lineage of a particular teacher of mine, who was Jack Clark, who taught at SUNY Buffalo. He took over the mythology class from Charles Olson, and he's a wonderful visionary poet, coming through Blake and Olson. So not very well known. So I want, and the Dogon is a mythology that was very much a one part of his vision. So when I was asked to bring something to the table, I wanted to meditate on the meaning of that card in terms of the relational solvent of water and emotions, and looking at it in terms of eros and friendship. So in essence, we're talking about feeling. And if you look at this whole economic crisis that we're looking at, and Mitt Romney and the politics of I like firing people,
Yeah.
There's definitely some water that's missing from this pathology, right?
Yeah.
We need this relational solvent, and you need it in poetry too. You need it in order to participate in any cosmological order, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Water is the unction of our soul, okay? And water is what we move and we spill, to nourish one another. So it's relational. It's an alchemical step of dissolution, and and the soul's alchemy demands water, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So the fascinating thing is looking at this question of the pineal gland, right, and the calcification of the pineal gland, and is the pineal gland open? Do you open the third eye? Is the third eye closed? And what really interests me is when you move into taking and understanding kind of the radical Jungian notion that soul is other. Okay, so if you're a cracker, who's your other, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a woman, could be a black man, okay? It could be someone that is so totally different from you, and that's where your soul is, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where your empathic vision and feeling and intuition is going to lead you, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So that's what got me, thinking about the soul's alchemy among poets. And this question of water and the pineal gland, and looking at the whole Dionysian tradition of the '60s, which we were talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the womb and the feral side of creation.
Yes.
And looking at ego consciousness in relationship to unconscious determinants, and having a capacity to stand in relationship to those dynamics of feeling and to participate in it. Okay, so it's about participating in cosmology, mythology, poetry, with this cooperative relationship between feeling and intuition, which is that order of belonging that is being suppressed in communities everywhere. Okay, in the pathological pathology of our system today, this is the order. This is the shadow space.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we look at where we are today, and we see that shadow space, and then we contemplate the mythological order of the Dogon, and their transmission and their disclosure, and you read that relationship elementally through the poetic implications of the hexagram 43 that this particular man had pulled for our council, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of get a sense of the dynamic movement, right?
Right.
Of the hexagram, right? Of the DNA codons, the sense of chains that entangle poets, right? Chains of text, chains of interpretation, chains of DNA, as a kind of culminating event that we held in May.
Right.
And so the wisdom of the Dogon, right, is really a water wisdom as a divine seed, right, that honors the womb of the earth, right, and and there's a sense of this of creation, which honors this water world of feeling, which is crucial for human survival on the planet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that,
absolutely.
I saw that. There's some real wisdom in the tradition, and I approach the tradition through through that of a cracker, of a white man, of a white poet who recognized and honored that tradition not as a straight up appropriation, right, but as a way of enlivening it in the widest possible continuum of human and cosmic consciousness. Okay.
Yeah.
So I want, and I think that as we go forward, in terms of, and Jack Clark would use the term time factor, right? And when he talks about time factor, he's talking not only about the zodiac itself, right? But he's also talking about the North Pole and the ecliptic. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So his sense of mythology is cued as a time factor to that starry script. Again, not only as the zodiac, but also as the polar mythic archetypes, right? And these become the images, okay, through which poetic events flow.
Now, is that what he is referring to when he uses the phrase the heterochrony of the aeon? Is that what he's referring to?
The heterochrony of the aeon, correct. So there's a developmental change, or a shift, okay, in terms of the time events, right? And now what a poet, everybody has a sense of a hunch, right, or an intuitive spark, or a synchronistic moment, right?
Yes.
That's not enough, okay? It's not enough to write that, from Jack Clark's perspective on poetics. It's not enough just to kind of nab that hunch or that flash, okay? You've got to put him in a much deeper time-factored relational context. Okay, so the synchronicity is not enough. An intuitive flash is not enough.
Interesting. So, what would be the course of action that Jack would recommend or incite people to explore?
Well, he would urge you to look for the other, right? Mm. Again, so that's. Now, Jack was also, Charles Olson had put forth an organization called the Curriculum of the Soul, which Jack and Al Glover were involved in presenting and producing. So these reflections on soul are crucial, and so what Jack is recommending is that you would look for the mythology of another that claims you. Interesting
stuff. Why is Charles Olson such an important figure?
Well, for me personally, or in terms of in terms of literature.
Yes, both, on both levels.
Okay, for me personally, Olson is really interesting because he comes from that Catholic working class background. Okay. Right. And he was plucked for an elite grooming in kind of the neoliberal British order, and so his life is interesting in terms of the roles and the cultural play. He worked as a New Dealer during World War II. He was involved in the Office of War Information. So, you can really get a line on the shift from modernity into the Dionysian 60s with Olson. So he gives us a way, to move from Pound into a cosmological mythopoetic order, and so in that sense, I click and I connect with the visionary depth of Olson's presentation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And from a cultural perspective, he is that link, and that's why he's important.
Yes, yeah, and I mean he's written some, he's written a magnificent epic poem.
Mm-hmm.
Much as Pound has also worked the epic. So that the sense of epic poetry is also something I value.
Yeah.
And seeing that great commitment to epic vision, which brings heaven and earth into play. He's an intuitive genius.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was in college, in fact, just as I was exiting college, the sound poets became quite popular. People like Michael Palmer and Pinsky, Robert Pinsky, and Bob Haas became, I believe, the poet laureate for a while. And it was really interesting for me because all my literary friends were very into the sound poets, and the language was really interesting, but the subject matter itself didn't really grab me. It felt like air, and on one level I could really grok and understand air as an element for poetry. There are elemental poets, like I think of Wallace Stevens as kind of a consummate air poet.
Yeah, definitely.
And at the same time, I felt like that there was something quite bloodless about the sound poets.
Yeah, no, I mean it's you have to go where you have to look for your wound in the wounds of others.
Yeah.
I mean, poetry is a kind of narcissistic woundscape, right? And the wound, the wound then becomes a womb, right?
Yes.
Through which you're looking for a kind of rebirth and healing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's interesting. I mean, I think questions of style. I mean, these are all elemental questions of the elements that one needs as a reader, right?
Yeah.
And there's a kind of energetic movement that takes shape through the elements in reading, and that's the alchemical modality of reading. But if there's no sense of soul, if there's no sense of a liminal space between what's been captured on one subject side and the other subject side, you're just left with that machine made of words that doesn't it may just be an airplane flying on hot air. And
right.
Not really taking you down or out or in or up. I mean, it depends on the direction that you need to go, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I had the same. Those are poets that didn't claim my attention.
Yeah.
And these are the limits that we operate within, right? In terms of what claims us and what doesn't.
Right. I would agree. The 60s. You brought up this whole notion of the 60s as this Dionysian era, and it was, and some of it, based on my research, was deeply manufactured, and from another standpoint, it was also, in some ways, its time. It was peaking. It was ready to really come to fruition. And again, it's one of those things where the occult forces meet kind of a cosmic moment in time, and then begin to drive the consensual perception from that point forward. And what's interesting about the 60s too is that since it was a Dionysian moment, just like Dionysus itself, it theoretically had to be torn asunder or torn apart.
Absolutely. It had to be ripped off.
Right, and ripped off. That's a great term. Not ripped off, ripped apart, but ripped off.
Ripped off and mostly ripped. I mean, it plays on a number of levels in terms of the rip-off of the 60s, right?
Absolutely. And that, in some ways, Kenneth, is part of your generation. You are a Pluto and Cancer guy.
I'm a Pluto and Leo guy.
You're Pluto. I'm sorry, Pluto. You're Pluto and Leo. That's right, Pluto and Leo. Pluto and Leo. You're a Pluto and Leo guy, and that's part of your generation. And how do you feel about it? Because you have Bill Clinton as your representative of the White House. God forbid we've got Barack Obama, but you've got Bill Clinton in the White House, and you've got guys like Jerry Rubin who are changing their stripes midstream. I mean, on some level, there's got to be some relationship to that which took place during your watch. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. Okay. So these are the kill the father guys that that finally ascend to power and turn into titans, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, so that's kind of the. I mean, the issue, with the Pluto and Leo, the Pluto and Leo generation, and I guess my Titanic experience, okay, of extension, right, of differentiation, right. That's the dynamic between the Titans and Dionysus, right? The Titans, dangle some toys, right, over the baby Dionysus, right, in the Orpheus story, and Dionysus, decides to go for those toys, and they dismember him.
Yes.
Okay, so I had my Titanic moments were the moments of the visionary alignment, right, where I was looking for that kind of political economic extension. When I was living in Lakewood, and so then you move into the contradictions, right, of differentiation and egoic extension, right? It's a relationship between the ego and the unconscious, right?
Yeah.
And how that ego may manipulate the collective unconscious in the service of his own personal unconscious.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I don't think that the story of the Pluto and Leo generation is an honorable story. I mean, I take no delight in Bill Clinton's extension.
Well, I don't think it's over either. I don't think the final chapter has been written on the Pluto and Leo generation. I don't.
Yeah.
And I think that there is, I think, an opportunity, not necessarily for redemption, but for the ability to bring all these various strands together. And I think if you look at sort of the medieval concept of the cathedral and how the cathedral is built by generations of families, right? Mm-hmm. It took a cathedral, about 125, 150 years to be built. Mm-hmm. And so you'd have at least 2 to 3 generations working on this one thing and working on it with the same amount of devotion, theoretically, as the generation before it. I mean, there's a lot of really good foundational stuff that the Pluto and Leo generation brought to the table, and I don't want to discount that. Okay, I don't want to just completely say, they're not your generation, and they are not the scapegoat. Okay, every generation has its own cross to bear and its own ability to not necessarily redeem itself, but to continue to add to that story. I don't think Pluto and Leo's story is over. Yeah, well, I guess really what you're really looking at, I would say, is you have both the dismembering of the Pluto and Leo, first of all going out and trying to kill the father, right, and then dismembering their own divine child, right? Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of the I think that's the if we'll have to see if. We'll have to see where that goes in terms of the dismemberment and the wound of that Pluto and Leo generation. For me, it's in the 3rd house. Right. Well, so that's where the power of your narrative comes from. Yeah, I mean that's absolutely. I mean that so that I mean the whole the narrative that I've put together. And my sun and moon are also in the 8th house. So, I mean, this sense of kind of the punkhole, right? Yeah. The sun in the toilet bowl of the universe, right? Yeah. Kind of really kind of, appreciaing, my last name is Warren, right? So there's that rabbit, right? Which is the underground tunnel of the rabbit, and the rabbit as a trickster, right? Yes. So that all of those are, kind of the mythological, archetypal lineaments of the narrative. Tacit, they play out in there, but for somebody who has a sense of the esoterics, I mean, the beauty of these symbols is that you see them in the soul's movement of what emerges, right, over the time of a man's or a person's writing. Yeah. Right, it's a kind of continuous system of opening up and enfoldment as one develops, right? Yeah, yeah. I wish we had more time. We've only got 5 minutes left, so I'd love to have you back on at some point. So let's get some business out of the way, and I want to ask you one more question.
Sure.
So people can get this book on your website and Amazon, and where else can they get it?
Well, you can get it at blazevox.org.
Blazevox, okay.
And you can get it at spdbooks.org.
Okay.
And, if you like dealing with the Matrix, you can get it from Amazon.
Okay. Okay.
If that's your preference.
Right. Let's go with BlazeVox. So you have a piece in here about Richard Grossinger, who's a friend of mine.
Yeah, well, that's how why don't you tell your story? And I'll tell you how I came to you.
Well, so I was reading this, and I was just emailing Richard, and I said, yeah, there's a piece on you in this book. And he says, well, that's the foreword to Dark Pool of Light, Volume 2.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow. And then he asked me, how do you know Kenneth? And that's how he ended his email. And I'm a huge Richard fan. I think Richard is one of the great minds.
He's a genius, yeah. He's the visionary prose writer of our generation.
I agree with you.
And that's how I came upon you, actually. Richard had sent me the manuscript for the book, and he references an interview that he had done with you on your show. And I thought, well, great. Let me check this out. And I listened to the interview, and I thought, man, Robert Phoenix is dynamite. And I've been listening ever since. So, I discovered you through Richard's manuscript, which is a trilogy, and it is dynamite.
I tell you what amazes me about Richard is how prolific he can be in such a short. It's not even just prolific. People can be prolific and just crank out crap, but Richard is prolific and profound.
Yeah, he's profound. He's precise. He's visionary, and he covers the content streams that he's able to synthesize and integrate are incredible. And you're gonna walk away with your eyes wide open and looking and seeing a hell of a lot more than when you started reading his book.
Yeah.
And this trilogy that he's got. If you're interested in the brain and consciousness, and the bottom line is, ultimately it is about experiential knowledge, and a good writer is going to deliver the substance of their own experience as well as their research, and it's the ability to bring all of that home and together. And Richard is just he's the best, man. I loved his magazine EO.
Yeah.
All of it. Planet Medicine, the Cranberry journals. He's been dynamite since the late '60s, and this Dark Pool, I think, is. It's just a phenomenal trilogy.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing too about Richard, from a personal level, is that he's never afraid to take an exacting look at himself at any given time. Yeah. And I really appreciate that about him.
Yeah, that self-scrutiny is always going on. He's someone that is, there's no question about his commitment to his own integrity.
Yeah.
And the integrity of the creative process.
Yeah.
He is someone, he's someone who evokes a great deal of trust in me, and I've trusted his writing, I've trusted his style, I've trusted his experience, and I've learned a hell of a lot from reading him over the years.
Yeah, well, good, and I'm glad through Richard I've been able to make your acquaintance.
Yeah, this has been great.
Yeah, and we'll have you back on again at some point in time. We'll just go down the punk hole a little bit further, and maybe we'll wait for some kind of meta event to bring you on, and I'll get your take on it. How's that sound?
Sounds good, Robert.
All right.
Great. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you,
Keep
Kenneth.
up the great work.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Take
Ciao,
care.
baby.
All right. Bye-bye. That's Kenneth Warren, the author of Captain Poetry, Sucker Punch, a great 60 minutes, getting into this whole concept of the personal narrative. All right. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to see open what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. I'll see you on Monday with the mashup. We've got the Olympics and the closing ceremonies this weekend. Hold on to your hats. Adios, amigos.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality. and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.